Hi, Providence students. I found a really fun book, especially if you like the How to Train Your Dragon stories. This is the very first one that the author ever wrote. It's called Hiccup, the Seasick Viking by Cressida, Cowell. To my father, gather round, said the ancient crab, and hear the tale of Hiccup, the Seasick Viking by Cressida, Cowell. Long ago, in a fierce and frosty land, there lived a lonely little Viking, and his name was Hiccup. Vikings were enormous, roaring thieves with bushy mustaches who sailed all over the world and took whatever they wanted. Hiccup was tiny, thoughtful, and polite. The other Viking children wouldn't let him join in their rough Viking games. Hiccup was frightened by spiders. He was frightened by thunder. He was frightened by sudden loud noises. Bang! But most of all, he was frightened by going to sea for the very first time. Next Tuesday. Hiccup wasn't sure he was a Viking at all. Hiccup's father was Stoic the Vast. Whenever Stoic walked, the ground trembled, the flowers wilted, and bunnies fainted. He hadn't brushed his beard in 30 years. Only girlies brush their beards, boomed Stoic the Vast. Girlies don't have beards, Hiccup pointed out, but no one listened to him. And when Hiccup told his father he was frightened by going to sea, Stoic laughed his enormous Viking laugh until the salty tears ran down to his enormous hairy feet. You can't be frightened, little Hiccup. Vikings don't get frightened. And he sang the Viking song. I've blackened the 1,000 eyes of 1,000 angry gales. Watch me knock the cockles off the biggest, bluest whales. I've given walruses nightmares who thought that they were strong. I've marooned a huge typhoon on an island off Hong Kong. Oh, ancient prawny greenness, the never-ending sea. Mess with squirmy jellyfish, but do not mess with me. Oh, do not mess with me. He patted Hiccup on the head and went off to do 300 push-ups before breakfast. Hiccup said to himself, it all sounds very dangerous. So Hiccup went to see the oldest Viking of all, Old Wrinkly himself, whose barnacled beard fell down past his toes. Your saltiness, he whispered, for Hiccup was very well-mannered. Do Vikings ever get frightened? Little grandson, wheezed Old Wrinkly, and his breath was like being kissed by mackerel. I've been wondering about that myself. The sea is full of trials and terrors, but it is also full of marvels and miracles. Go to sea, and you can tell me if Vikings ever get frightened. So, at 8:45 on a breezy Tuesday morning, Hiccup went to sea for the very first time. At 9:30, Hiccup was wishing he hadn't eaten those 2 smallish haddock for breakfast. At 9:45, he was feeling very peculiar indeed. And at 10:30, he wished he was dead. I feel seasick, he said to his father. Vikings don't get seasick, said Stoic the Vast. But this one was all over Stoic's feet. Hiccup got sicker and sicker as the storm got wilder and wilder. Stoic the Vast sang the Viking song to the storm, but the storm took no notice. A great wave came up and soaked him. One mighty wave picked up that whole Viking ship as if it were a matchstick and threw it 50 miles to the south. Then one mighty blast from the gale picked up the whole Viking ship as if it were a piece of seaweed and threw it 50 miles to the west. A terrible black wind howled all over the lonely ocean. It turned that Viking ship upside down and inside out and sent shivers down every single Viking's spine. "We're lost," said Seasick, in the not so vast after all. Then a funny thing happened. His face began to turn a greenish hue, and the thought of the 37 largest haddock he had had for breakfast, and his stomach began to heave. And then all the Vikings turned a pretty green color, and all their stomachs heaved, and with an almighty rush they ran to the side. "Well, well," said Hiccup, "it appears that Vikings do get seasick." And immediately he began to feel better. "This direction," shouted Hiccup. But the Vikings were too busy being seasick to steer the boat. So Hiccup took charge, and a funny thing happened. The more he steered, the better he felt. As he headed for home, that stormy wind filled the sails, and the boat skimmed over the ocean at 1,000 miles an hour. Out of the depths of the sea came shoals of flying fish with wings, leaping dolphins, and strange whales with horns like unicorns. There were eels that lit up like light bulbs, and nameless things with enormous eyes that no one had ever seen before, all following Hiccup the Viking as he steered that ship toward home. "Nice breezy day," hummed Hiccup, steering into the harbor. "So tell me," said Old Wrinkly, and his old watery eyes twinkled, "do Vikings ever get frightened?" "Sometimes they do," said Stoic the Vast. "But they get over it," said Hiccup the Viking. "That's what makes them so brave." Vikings sometimes get seasick. Mess with squirming jellyfish, but do not mess with me. The end. Thank you for listening. Have a great week.